The Consumer Price Index inflation report for April was released, indicating a rate of 4.9%. This is considered an unfavorable report as it reflects a slight decline from the previous month's rate of 5%. The stock market, however, reacted positively and surged at the opening due to headlines suggesting that the inflation report was positive. The headline reveals that inflation dropped from 5% to 4.9% on a year-over-year basis. However, when examining month-over-month data, inflation actually increased by 0.4%. Looking at core inflation, which excludes certain items like food and energy prices, it stood at 5.5%, also up 0.4% month-over-month. Core inflation is considered a better indicator by the Federal Reserve. Nevertheless, when observing core inflation, there doesn't seem to be much progress. In February, core inflation was at 5.5%, and the current report indicates the same rate. Therefore, the notion of progress or a great report can be subject to interpretation, but it's difficult to view going from 5.5% 2 months ago to 5.5% today as progress. Let's break down the year-over-year statistics. Energy prices have decreased by 5.1%, services excluding housing have increased by 6.8%, food prices have risen by 7.7%, shelter costs have gone up by 8.1%. Focusing on food inflation, the increase of 7.7% remains considerably high. This raises concerns because the April jobs report indicates that wages for Americans are only growing by 4%. This implies that essential expenses such as food are rising at a faster pace than income. It's worth noting that many categories, including food, are experiencing higher inflation rates than the 4% wage growth. Nonetheless, the market appears content because although food inflation is still increasing, it is doing so at a lower rate. Let's review the year-over-year statistics for specific food items. Milk is up 1.6%, fruit and vegetables are up 2%, butter is up 5%, coffee is up 6.6%, bread is up 12%, and eggs are up 21.4%. Energy prices have decreased by 5.1% year-over-year, mainly due to a significant rise in oil and gasoline prices during April of the previous year. However, it's important to note that electricity prices have increased by 8.4%, and although gasoline prices are down 12.2% year-over-year, they have been gradually increasing again. Shifting focus to shelter, it has experienced an 8.1% increase. This figure remained unchanged from 8.2% in March and 8.1% in February, indicating that shelter inflation has not shown any significant movement in the CPI reports. Improvements in shelter inflation are anticipated to occur around June. However, it's important to understand that the calculation of shelter inflation in the CPI reports is designed to exhibit gradual progress rather than sudden drops. This calculation involves using existing contracts instead of relying solely on market rates, resulting in a lag in reflecting real-world changes. Consequently, there may be distortions in the report when compared to real-world observations. The next category to discuss is services, excluding housing, which has been a 6.8% increase. This category holds significant importance for the Federal Reserve as it pertains to the labor market and wage inflation, which contributes to overall inflation. The Federal Reserve closely monitors this aspect. The strong jobs report in April, with the addition of 253,000 jobs, is a key reason why services excluding housing remains elevated at 6.8%. This figure surpasses the headline rate of 4.9% and also exceeds the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York's monthly microeconomic data report for April provides some insights. It suggests that in 2023, gas prices, food prices, rents, and medical care costs are expected to continue rising, albeit at a slower pace compared to 2022. Regarding home prices, the report mentions that they are anticipated to experience growth, with expectations reaching the highest level since July. While some individuals desire a housing market crash due to the current lack of affordability, the report suggests that home prices have risen significantly compared to pre-pandemic levels. However, the expectation is for modest gains or losses in home prices rather than a crash. Now let's examine the labor market. The report indicates a 41% expectation of higher unemployment rates in the next 12 months. Although this figure has increased, it remains relatively low. It's noteworthy that the Federal Reserve projects the unemployment rate to be at 4.5% in December, whereas the current rate stands at 3.4%. Looking at it historically, the current unemployment rate is exceptionally low, leaving little room for further decline. Realistically, there is a higher likelihood of the rate moving upward in the future. According to the survey, there has been an increase in the probability of individuals losing their jobs in the next 12 months, reaching 12 12.2%. Moreover, respondents expressed that the likelihood of finding a new job after losing one has decreased to its lowest levels since September of 2021, standing at 55.2%. These findings suggest a less favorable outlook for the labor market. Moving on to household finances, it is projected that the household income will grow by 3.1% this year. However, this growth rate continues to decline. This is concerning because it indicates that people's incomes will not experience significant growth. The Federal Reserve views this as a positive, as it implies lower wage inflation. Their perspective is that if Americans stop earning higher incomes, there will be less overall inflation. However, with inflation running at 4.9% or even 5.5%, considering headline or core inflation, it means that expenses are rising at a faster pace than wages. This leads to a decline in real wages and purchasing power. Essentially, it feels like taking a pay cut, which ultimately results in a lower standard of living. Unfortunately, negative real wages and consecutive years of pay cuts have become the norm, accumulating significantly over time. Now let's turn our attention to household spending. It is anticipated that households will increase their spending by 5.2% this year. Notice that households are expecting their expenses to rise at a faster rate, 5.2%, compared to their income growth, 3.1%. Essentially, people foresee their expenditures outpacing their income. However, the Federal Reserve views this as a positive for GDP and overall economic activity, emphasizing the resilience of the American consumer. Due to inflation, people are compelled to spend more money on necessities, and it's important to note that we are not even considering luxury goods in this context. As observed, essential items such as food, electricity, and shelter are all experiencing significantly faster price increases than income growth expectations. Consequently, people are driven to spend more due to inflationary pressures rather than it being a reflection of their willingness or strength as consumers. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve takes a more optimistic stance, perceiving it as a demonstration of resilience. The banking sector continues to face challenges in the current environment of higher interest rates. While it is not necessary to sympathize with their situation, it's important to understand the implications. As a result, banks are tightening their credit policies, leading to a slowdown in the flow of credit. This will pose an additional challenge for the economy in the coming months. However, the Federal Reserve and economists argue that tighter credit conditions could have a positive impact by reducing inflation. The rationale behind this theory is that if people have limited access to loans and credit, there will be a decrease in the purchase of homes, cars, and other goods, ultimately lowering demand and inflation. Essentially, the intention is to bring down inflation by curbing consumer spending. While this approach may not be favorable for the American people, the Federal Reserve seems content with it, as it may eliminate the need for significant interest rate hikes in the future. They refer to the tightening of credit conditions as the substitute effect, as it is expected to slow down the economy, potentially making further interest rate increases unnecessary.